Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a very special event for you today, and it's the first day of fall. So let's start fall off right. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mark Guest. I teach both in the Masters in Environment program as well as in the ORE program. And we have a very special treat for you today. Our topic today is the outdoor industry. Got to stay over here where the light is bright. And the outdoor recreation economy is a powerhouse, right? It's at an inflection point right now. It's almost $400 billion economy, which represents almost 2% of our nation's GDP. It's rapidly growing economy, and communities, countries want to take advantage of it, but we only have one chance to do it right? How do we do it in a way in which we take into account all key stakeholders, right? That we build organizations that can sustain over time, that can do well and do good. So we have a very dear friend of mine today. Luis was kind enough to come and join us, and we asked him to talk about two things. One, about his exciting career so that we can be inspired by it, learn from it, understand his path. And then secondly, about the economy, right? Is what is the potential of this economy, and where is it going, and what role can we play to, again, do well and do good? So it's my honor to introduce Luis Benitez. He told me not to read this whole thing, but I love his bio. It's so diverse, it's so unique, it's so relevant for our discussion today that I'm going to read the whole thing, whether he likes it or not. Luis Benitez is the Vice President of Government Affairs and Global Impact for VF Corporation, one of the world's largest apparel, footwear, and accessory companies, connecting people to the lifestyles, activities, experiences they cherish most through a family of iconic outdoor, active, and workwear brands. Their iconic brands include North Face, Icebreaker, Smart Wool, just to name a few. Luis's early career was spent conducting mountaineering, climbing, and skiing courses for the International Outward Bound Schools, which he advanced to becoming the Director of Operations and Chief Guide for Adventure Consultants, a 7 Summits guiding company based in New Zealand, made famous for the book Into Thin Air. If you haven't read that, you definitely should. Luis has led parties of climbers to the summit of some of Earth's most inspiring peaks. His first of his 6 summits of Mount Everest was in 2001 with the blind athlete Eric Weinmeier, and Luis has guided the other famed 7 summits a total of 32 times. From guiding and as a byproduct of their work, working with governments around the world, Luis pivoted from full-time talent development work with ski company Vail Resorts. He was also at that time elected to City Council in Eagle, Colorado, serving as the youngest councilman for the town. Luis then came to VF from leading the Outdoor Recreation Industries Office, the first office he was the first director of that office for our state, the second office in the country of the state of Colorado via his appointment by then Governor Hickenlooper. At the heart of his career, Luis was always focused on teaching as well as serving. Some of his most rewarding work has been to help create nonprofit Trekking for Kids, which focuses on service-based expeditions, allowing participants to climb and trek while teaching them about local issues like housing and healthcare for orphans around the world. He has worked closely with Warriors to Summits, a nonprofit focusing on serving returning veterans by connecting them with the outdoors. Luis believes that a major shift is taking place, one in which the outdoor industry will transform into a powerful force for economic development, conservation and stewardship, education and workforce development, and the intersection between public health and wellness and spending time outside. Most importantly, he's an amazing human being, a dear friend, a servant leader doing his best to make a lasting and positive difference. We're grateful to have you here. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Luis Benitez.
That's good night, everybody. That's it. That was pretty much the whole show. I do want to thank Mark for that introduction and a little bit about Mark and I's relationship. I like to blame him for the second part of my life, pretty much. He likes to tell this story that I walked into an MBA, get to know an MBA program at DU, long hair. You say beads? Was I wearing beads? Birkenstocks, all my years. Hired me at Vail Resorts, pointed me on a very different path than full-time guiding. So because you're here tonight, I would consider all of you to be truly the true believers in this industry, in this economy, and that you probably come with a little bit of curiosity of how to connect the dots. So first of all, thank you for being here. And second of all, whenever I see him, thank you, Mark, for helping me get a haircut and take the beads off. Try something different. What I want to talk to you about tonight is really the opportunity that's in front of the industry. And I think for the longest time, the industry is really considered a collection of fun kids and outliers and dirtbags, whatever word you want to choose. Folks that did all these really amazing, passionate sports or activities, but really never got to connect the dots on how that passion for things outside connected to professional careers. There were some of the usual things like, well, I could go be an environmentalist, I could work for an NGO, maybe I could work for a ski company or a gear company, and all those traditional paths for what came next. And everybody know this symbol really quick? What is it? I'm not trying to be pedantic, but the Colorado Outdoor Recreation Industry Office symbol, which was my old office. But does anybody know the story about how it became Colorado's actual symbol? Do you know that this has now been adopted as the official Colorado symbol? So a sidekick in my office when I worked for Governor Hickenlooper, and I created this with, I can't remember the software, it was like, cost us $80 and over a couple of years. I put this together after a couple of ideations, and I was walking around the outdoor retailer show with Governor Polis after he got elected, and this logo was on my backpack. And he pulled me aside, he said, Luis, what's that logo? And I said, oh, it's the Outdoor Industry Office logo. We built this, and this is how we define the Outdoor Industry Office. And he said, that's awesome. I want that to be the new Colorado logo. Now, I point this out because, and I don't think anybody's here from that marketing agency, so I can say this. You know that little triangle logo that Colorado had? Has anybody seen that before? So it's like the Colorado, it was like they had it on CDOT trucks a lot. So that's where you saw it. It was like a triangle that had a division in it and a little triangle that said CO. It was the most awful logo around. It cost the state millions and millions of dollars. And this was created with like $80 of software. And the reason why I start with that is because that's truly what our industry is known for. Innovation, inspiration in a really rapid ideation. And how do you capture that? Where does that come from? How do you try to harness the things that make you the most passionate, whatever you get to do every single day? And I want to point out a very sort of simple fact for me is that I got started in the outdoor industry at a really, really early age. This photo should be fuzzy for a reason. I like to tell people that I grew up in the outdoor industry, and there were two parts of my family, the American side and the Ecuadorian side. On the American side, my American grandfather owned a sporting goods store in St. Louis, Missouri for fly fishing and bird hunting. And he started the store after World War II. And I was much more interested in jumping off of benches and playing and hanging out than I was actually learning how to fly fish. But half of my family came from a small specialty retail store. And the way my grandfather's store got started is kind of an interesting story, which I think is indicative of the outdoor industry, both then and now, by the way. 8th grade education, came from rural Arkansas, and met my grandmother at a USO dance and started repairing fly reels and fly rods and shotguns in his then mother-in-law, my great-grandmother's basement. And he got a reputation to be a really great fly fishing guide in the Midwest and a really great bird hunting guide in the Midwest. And as his reputation grew and his reputation for being a skilled tradesman in repairing rods and reels grew, some local businessmen came to him and said, Bill, we'd really love you to start an outdoor shop. We don't have one in St. Louis. At the time, there was no Orvis dealership. For those of you that know that fly fishing brand, there's no Orvis dealership in St. Louis. We want you to start a shop so we can come and buy stuff and we don't have to order it from someplace else. He said, well, that's great, but I know nothing about running a store. And they told him, well, your wife's an accountant. My grandmother was an accountant and you seem to be good at this stuff. So we're going to float you a loan. We're going to give you all the money you need to start your shop with 2 rules. One, once you're solvent and you're doing well, we can come in and grab anything off the shelf we want, and you're going to have to eat the cost. And we'll be respectful. We won't grab a whole bunch of stuff and walk out. And 2, when we want you to come guide us on a trip, you have to find somebody else to run the shop with your wife, because the reason why we like you so much is because you're such a great guy. Does that sound like the most incredible job opportunity on the planet? And I grew up hearing this story from him, and I asked him years later, like, who were these people that just gave you a bunch of money for nothing just because you could catch fish really well, and told you to open a physical brick and mortar store? Like, that just, like, there's VC funding, but grandpa, that just doesn't happen. He's like, well, you know, Anheuser-Busch, right? Well, there was Augie Busch Sr., and you know, the Danforth family, Senator Danforth, John Danforth, and the Ashcroft family. So it's a bunch of politicos, mostly Republican, a bunch of champions of industry in St. Louis that believed in this idea of creating a space to gather to celebrate the thing that everybody loved, regardless of political stripe. And that's really where half of my education for the outdoor industry came from. My grandfather created this great space in the back of the shop, had leather chairs and a little, like one of those little mini fridges that was stacked with booze. And all of these old codgers would come in at the end of their workday. That's where I learned how to mix a highball, like learned what a gin and tonic was. I was this little kid who would mix these drinks for all these folks. My grandfather had a phone installed called the Bat phone. It was a red phone. And for those of you that aren't old enough to remember this, you know, the little da, 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 da. And all of these guys at the time, it was mostly men, handed out the phone number to their partners and their wives, and the phone would ring, and they would all send me over to pick up the phone and say, nope, sorry, Senator's not here, and hang up the phone. And almost to a point, they would love to come in and hang out in the shop. Now, how many of you have been into Neptunes, you've been into REI, and you just go for a wander? Anybody? Why do you like doing that? What's it about? Good stuff, right? Just, oh my God, that's gorgeous. I love that color. I have 4 of those jackets, but I this color, it's salmon. It's so amazing. And all of these guys came together in my grandfather's store to talk about conservation, stewardship, how to protect wildlife, and how to just keep buying gear. And even at a young age, I started to ask myself, why does one thing equal the other? Why does the passion of wandering around an outdoor store translate to the passion of being outside, translates to me willingly pulling money out of my pocket and laying it down for something that I already have 3 of? It's a really unique concept. And, you know, I kept on with this theory, and I kept on, you know, doing the traditional things that your parents want you to do. I went to school and tried to figure out what came next. And the other half of my family is Latino, and any Latinos out there, like strong Latinos, like with, you know, families from overseas. So half my family is from Ecuador, and I am the firstborn son of the firstborn son. So straight to law school, I was supposed to go. Like, that was the plan. There was no conversation, like, you're going to go to undergrad, you're going to go to law school. That's it. I'll never forget the day that I went home and told my parents that I was going to move to Colorado and be an outward bound instructor. Any guesses on how that conversation went? Have any of you had that kind of conversation with your folks? You feel a little touched in this moment? Yeah, it's a real thing. Back then, they're like, you're going to do what? And be what? My dad thought, like, glorified camp counselor. I don't understand. What's outward bound? Isn't that where you take bad people into the woods and like, are you going to be an adjudicated, like, caseworker, youth worker? That doesn't make sense to me. And, you know, for me, it was just a natural progression of, I love being outside. I loved gear. Experiential education is a large part of what the industry does. So it seemed natural to me that this was a part of the progression. I always had the dream of getting to the Himalayas and being a guide. That was always something that was deep seated in me. I blamed National Geographic, reading all those magazines when I was a little kid. And so this seemed like a natural progression. Working for Outward Bound here in Colorado in the 90s, all the iconic American mountaineers worked there. So Pete Athens, Wally Bird, Kitty Calhoun Grissom, the list goes on and on and on. And I was the young 19, 20, 21-year-old assistant guide who just liked to carry a big heavy backpack and walk up and down hill. Didn't really know much about leadership or effective communication or good expedition behavior. I just wanted to be a mountaineer. But what struck me was you can't do these things without effective communication. You can't survive out there without knowing a little bit about leadership, and that all of those things matter. And slowly, year after year, it started to dawn on me that this wasn't just a job, it was an industry. And within that industry, all of these amazing folks would eventually evolve through these jobs to go on and do other things. And where it really hit home for me was our then executive director, Mark Udall, left Outward Bound to go run for Senate. And he became Colorado's senator. And so for me, now the Udall family is an iconic political family in the United States. He had relatives that was Secretary of the Interior, other relatives that were senators. So that kind of made sense from a legacy perspective. But the 2 and 2 that I added up in my head was, why is the executive director of Outward Bound becoming a senator? Like, how does that translate? What does that even mean? And so I kept thinking about it through my personal journey, and eventually, as most folks in the industry, got into expedition guiding. That took me all over the world. And so again, being half Ecuadorian, a lot of my dues were paid in Latin America. I guided in Ecuador all through my 20s and my late teens, and really didn't know how the connectivity to the Himalayas was going to happen. There was no place to apply necessarily. The outdoor industry, as most of you know, is pretty much governed by that apprenticeship, mentorship process. I hate to say it's who you know and how you know them, because seems pretty transactional. But what I will say is the outdoor industry carries on this tradition of, we take care of each other. If there's a job opening that you might be interested in, and I know you a little bit, I'm going to try to get that in front of you so you can find your home and your place in our community. And my journey was no different. This is kind of an intrinsic value, I think, for the industry. So in Ecuador, anybody been climbing in Ecuador, by the way? Anyone? Right on. It's great. So there's a big hut system. Every glaciated peak has huts at about 15,000, 16,000 feet. And my first job in the industry was to be a hut boy on this mountain called Cotopaxi. So what's a hut boy? Have any of you seen the movie Waterboy with Adam Sandler? Anyone? It's kind of an old school movie, but it's the most god-awful, thankless entry-level job you could possibly imagine. You're melting ice and snow to fill climbers' water bottles and thermoses. You're making dinner, you're making breakfast, you're sweeping out the bathrooms, you're sweeping out the bunkhouse. You're just there to help. It's just grunt work. And I worked there every summer, and I loved every minute of it, because Ecuador is seen as a training ground that a lot of the international guiding companies would bring their clients down to climb in Ecuador before going on to other big mountain ranges all over the world. So I'd be sitting there sweeping up the kitchen, and all of a sudden, Reinhold Messner would walk in, guy that's summited all 14 8,000 meter peaks, speaking in really rapid fire German, asking for a cup of tea. And I'm like, oh my God, you're Reinhold Messner. Yes, absolutely, Mr. Messner, I'll be right back. And people are like, why is there half American, half Ecuadorian kid serving me tea? Nobody could figure out what my deal was and what my story was. So I just ended up being a fly on the wall, trying to listen, trying to learn. And then what happens to a lot of people that work in the huts, both the men and women that would work in the huts, is that we sometimes get the call to be a turnaround guide. And so what that is that most companies would hire local help. So on summit night, when you'd be going for the summit, somebody would have to turn around if they got sick, they didn't feel good. Instead of losing one of their, which is ironic, one of their qualified guides, they'd tie you to some junior to drag you back down the glacier and back down to the hut, with no medical training, no experience, very limited experience. It's a miracle. Most of the turnaround guides never fell into a crevasse. So I'll never forget, I was in the kitchen, finishing up dinner, and one of the guides walked into the kitchen, and it was Rob Hall, the guy that used to own Adventure Consultants, who, if you've read Into Thin Air, if you've seen the movie Everest, he was killed on Everest in '96. He said, Luis, his Kiwi accent, he was a huge guy, 6'5". You know, I'm a turnaround guy, didn't come up from Quito tonight. I mean, wondering if you'd like to have a job and got our clients around if anybody gets sick. Are you interested? All I heard was I just got my full-time job from a global company as a mountain guy. I was like, absolutely. He handed me the radio and I called it in my sleeping bag. And I don't really like to say it in this way, but I've never really wished harm on anyone in my life other than that night where I was sort of repeating the mantra, please somebody get sick so I can go up and prove myself. Just something go wrong so I can go up and show what I'm capable of. Because I think we all look for that entry level opportunity. Sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's skill, sometimes it's strategy to be able to prove what you're capable of. And I think we're like any other industry out there that you look for that gateway and that opportunity. Mine just happened to be at 19,000 feet in the middle of the night in Ecuador on a glaciated peak at about 3 o'clock in the morning when the radio popped alive. Luis, I got one guy's not feeling so well. I'll leave him up right behind this picture. And would you mind coming in? Come and grab it. Sure, Rob, on the way. Got dressed, chopped up a bunch of cheese and salami, filled a thermos with tea. Went way too fast up to where this person was stuck behind this little ice wall. I laid out this picnic spread at like 5 o'clock in the morning. Good morning, my name is Luis. I'll be your rescuer today. This poor guy with bad altitude sickness looked at him. He looked at me. I looked at him. He looked at the food. He promptly threw up all over everything. Like, oh, ready to go down now. So I recognize that the skill sets that you start with aren't necessarily the skill sets that are going to get you to the next thing, the next step. And I knew that if I was going to get here, I was going to have to get really, really strategic about what I was doing. I often find that in the industry, at least historically, people kind of fumble their way through the process. I'm going to be a guide. I'm going to work for a nonprofit. Maybe I'll do an advanced degree to figure out how it's going to connect the dots. I stayed worried for a really long time. How the hell is one thing going to attach to the next thing? It's going to attach to the next thing. I didn't really feel comfortable in just letting fate take over. I realized that I needed to, like most other industries, map out a plan and map out a strategy. And I knew that if I was going to get to Everest, I had to work for a company that guided the 7 summits. Now let's reflect on the story I just told you. I knew a CEO, Rob Hall, who guided the 7 summits through Adventure Consultants based in New Zealand. I had his mobile number because he was so grateful for what I had done for him, a couple of trips in Ecuador, helping him as a turnaround guy. And so I thought, this is going to be easy. I know exactly how I'm going to get my next job. I bailed Rob out a bunch of times. I'm good friends with the CEO. I'm going to give him a call, and that's going to be it. I didn't factor in the time difference between Colorado and New Zealand when I called his cell phone number. And as the CEO of an international guiding company, he had to pick up the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning. Who the hell is this? Who? Luis? Who? Oh, like, what? Ecuador? Like he was totally asleep, had no idea who I was. Said, yeah, we've got guy tryouts in Wanaka, New Zealand in the spring. Come on down if you're interested in trying out. I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. That's not going to happen. And so I eventually reached a place in my career where I said, like maybe this is it. Maybe this is enough. This is exactly what I want to be doing. I'm guiding, I'm making decent money, I'm traveling the world. Maybe this is it. Maybe I don't have to go to the Himalayas to be happy. Maybe I don't need to aspire to that next thing, but it bothered the hell out of me. It really, it was that one lingering thing that I just couldn't figure out how to crack the code. Now, here's where I think it's important to understand that opportunity doesn't always look like opportunity. The way I finally got invited to go to Everest came in a really unique way, and Mark alluded to it in his introduction. I share this picture with you. This is on the summit of Everest. This is my 5th summit on top. I'm in the middle as the COO of Adventure Consultants. The new CEO after Rob died, Guy Cotter, is on my right, and our CFO, Mark Seddon, is on the left. 3 executive officers for a company on top of Everest at the exact same time. Does that sound like good governance or good business, especially for the company that lost their CEO in a storm on Everest in 1996. We got back and we called our chief attorney, our chief counsel, like, what the hell were you guys thinking being on top of the same day? The reason why I share this is because I'm going to reflect again, opportunity isn't always opportunity. And the difference with our industry is the blind passion that will lead you towards your final destination. So often in other industries and other economies, it's all strategic, it's basic math. If I do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to get this. I would argue the magic of who we are and what we do is the equation of the passion that drives you towards that destination. And it's the thing that often brings the most frustration because it's what you love, it's what you want, it's what you're pointed towards. And so why can't you connect the professional with the personal? And so I point out my journey was no different. This is the culmination of success of that hard work. But where it started was really what we're here to talk about. Now, Mark quoted some numbers, which are actually tinier than the reality. Do you see this? Sure, I assume everyone in here understands the gravity of some of these numbers. This represents it and is indicative to all of the people that make up this economy around the world. This is indicative of an economy that is driven by passion, fueled by a little bit of luck, a little bit of strategy, and a whole lot of innovation. And the question most people ask is, because this tally just started a couple of years ago, the Bureau of Economic Measurement in DC index, the Department of Commerce just started measuring us like 5 years ago. And it dumbfounded everybody, economists. I literally just spoke at the Federal Reserve, the Midwest Bank yesterday, and I showed this exact slide to a room full of economists, and even them, like, how are all the kids that ski and climb and bike and boat and fish and hunt, how in God's holy green earth, how are you worth that much money? Is it because the fleece jacket is expensive? One woman literally asked me, there's a PhD, an economist, all those jackets are really expensive. So that's what this is, right? That's what this is. People can't figure out why this is us. And this is my response. Now, half of you are like, I've made a horrible mistake with my Thursday evening. I should be someplace else. This guy is nuts. I'm going to sleep on the back. I'm going to quiet. The other half is saying, before I go camping with my friends, genius, we got to get it right. This is awesome. The innovation and the uniqueness of us is what we have to celebrate, gang. The rest of the economies out there poke at us and say, get in a box, get back in a box. I know you're worth a lot of money, but now we got to codify it. We got to explain it. And you have to adhere to these rules to be able to move this forward. And my argument is always this. I was here when this happened, gang. I was the mountain guy. I'm like, oh my God, we forgot the stoves. We got to cook for 9 people. How in the hell? Oh my God. This guy, my friend, calmly walked to his truck, got a rake out of the back, got a wet wipe that he had, like wiped down all the tongs, stuck every hot dog on it. This is what we do. This is what we're about. And this is who we are. The dirtbags, the believers, the people that at face value are like, oh my God, that looks like an encampment for people that don't have a job, don't know what they're doing. And I share this is at base camp on Everest, literally after walking in and laying out all my stuff to dry after coming down from the summit. And I've done the math in my head of all the gear that you see in here. I'm surrounded by about $20,000 worth of equipment, sitting in a place that clients pay up to $70,000 for the privilege of going on an expedition. Working with people that are champions of industry and economies who are paying for that privilege to suffer. Tell me there's not a political voice in the middle of that equation. Tell me that this economy and these folks that do all these things don't deserve a seat at that table. So let's talk about that for a minute, economic development. Now, there's a general dollars and cents of what we do and how we do it. And I think that's important to understand. And now that we're being counted towards the GDP, there is a lot of buzz in Washington, DC and other places of how do I get a piece of that? If I had a nickel for every venture capitalist I talk to that wants to look for something to invest in, kind of like tech and IT, and I have to explain to them, well, if you invest in a startup gear company, you're going to be probably last one in, last one out, and you've got a 98% chance you'll never see another dime of your money ever again. Like, well, that be worth billions of dollars. That doesn't make sense to me. So let's talk about it from a methodology perspective. How many mountain bikers are in the room? Yeah, a few. All right. Did you start out mountain biking like the person in the bottom left corner? No? Yes? Maybe? Trails? Anybody start out by the person in the upper left corner? That's terrifying to me, frankly. And that's up in Breckenridge. Now, imagine the lift ticket that's sold to get onto the mountain, to ride on the infrastructure, all the gear that you see in the picture, and the evolution of a sport. I still have this article from 1999 that somebody in the Audubon Society wrote about mountain bikers in Crested Butte that say they will kill birders. They'll kill birds too. It's an abomination of bikes, and the whole sport should be banned from even existing. Think about the multi-billion-dollar economy that's mountain biking. And those are naysayers from within our ecosystem, saying can't be done, shouldn't be done, bad idea to even try. Now, consider a marketing budget for a second. All right. So I work for a company, VF, which is a holding company of 13 iconic outdoor industry brands. North Face, Vans, I'm fully branded tonight. Smartwool underwear, Timberland jeans, whole 9 yards. We have millions and millions of dollars that we put towards cause marketing and budgets. And when I was on town council in Eagle, Colorado, we had this local bluegrass band that would play every night at the local microbrewery that had tens of thousands of followers on Instagram. And we were thinking about raising our profile of town as being a mountain biking destination, a stand-up paddleboarding destination. And I knew some of these guys and I couldn't figure out, like, what do they do? What was their secret? I'd been to hear them play a couple times, but walked into the concert halfway through and then left or had a beer, got distracted. So I never really asked the question, but finally one day I did, and then I just asked a very straightforward business-oriented question. How do you guys do your marketing? And Bob, the dude on the left is Bob, said, this is what we do. Wish you were here, written on a piece of cardboard off of an old box out of a pile of recycling stuff. And every tourist that comes through and goes to one of their shows, say, pick it up, take a picture. We'd love to take a picture with you. Boom, wish you were here. Beautiful backdrop of mountains, everything else. That's how they got their following, a piece of cardboard and a marker, a Sharpie. So when it comes to should we behave like other economies, are we supposed to behave like other economies? My argument is no, because this is the magic of who we are within that innovation. Never think that your idea is too crazy, too weird, too outlandish, especially in our economy, because this is how things move. So final example, young Thundercats in the upper right-hand corner. How many people learned how to paddle in a canoe? Anybody? Yeah, the old aluminum ones, where it was, even if it was like 60 degrees outside, if it was sitting out in the sunshine and you sat down in it, it was like 150 degrees and you got a little burn mark on the back of your leg. That's how I learned to paddle as well. So that's our baggage within the industry. And I call it baggage for a very specific reason. Because if you stick in your methodology, put it this way, mountain bikers don't like dirt bikers. Dirt bikers don't like mountain bikers. Hikers don't like mountain bikers. Climbers, who do they like? Who do they hate? So there's always this triangulation of who should or shouldn't be a part of our industry and a part of our family, which I argue diminishes our opportunity for a political voice and gravity as an entire industry. So more on that in a minute, but I showed up visiting these kids for their first paddle class, and that's the question I asked. This is so cool, you guys are learning how to paddle. Where are your canoes? And the little boy with the yellow hat turned around backwards, looked at me and said, canoes? Like the Native Americans used at Thanksgiving? Like, well, I don't have no idea. Did you just read a book about Thanksgiving, little boy? Why are you like, and the little girl on the left said, yeah. They build a frame with sticks and cover it with skins, and that's how they used to ride down rivers. That's a canoe. These two kids were having this story, like, no, like, do you have a metal canoe? Like, where are your boats? Where's your stuff? And little boy finally looked at me and said, my daddy sups. He's a stand-up paddleboarder, and I'm here to learn how to sup. Stand-up paddleboard. Now, if I would have told you even 6 years ago that with $400 and a trip to Costco, you could buy an inflatable surfboard and without any swiftwater rescue training, go paddle down any body of water anywhere in the world for fun, you probably would have said, that's crazy. That's oceans do that. We don't do that. We're mountain people. Yeah, we go rafting, we go tubing, but an inflatable surfboard? How does that even work? And yet now there's this segment of the economy where it's not just the cool kids showing up to do this. It's mom, dad, grandma, grandpa. Anybody done stand-up paddleboard yoga? Anybody tried that? That's the hardest, like my core, that's the hardest thing you could ever possibly try. An entire economy, folks, that didn't exist before literally 7 to 10 years ago. And not a tiny one either, multi-million-dollar piece of the pie. All through asking really simple questions. What if we try? What if we market it? What if we sell it? Is this possible? I don't know. So the question comes, where does our innovation come from? How many of you have that crazy friend where it's like, oh yeah, they're definitely gonna die? That's, I'm just waiting for the phone call. They're just pushing it too hard. Like make a ski binding in your garage. Like that's just nuts. This is a very close personal friend of mine. He couldn't figure out how to put a basket on the front of his bike, and he commutes, doesn't have a car. He's like, this is the only solution. I've got to figure out how to make this better. This is how I get back and forth to the grocery store. All right, well, that's gonna fall apart and not work so well. And his job was like most of us in the outdoor industries, you're finding your way. He was a cook, he was a waiter, he was a part-time river guide. Like he just kind of found a way to connect the dots and figure it out. Then came innovation number 2, where I was like, yeah, you're definitely gonna die. Like, no, it's super cool. I pulled the car apart, it's a sidecar. There was this old car seat. Like, how does this even stay together? It's insane. Like, what is the purpose? Like, well, first of all, it's fun. Anybody play with Legos when you were a kid? Anyone? Tinker Toys? Like building stuff? My argument with the REI principle is the reason we like to go in and stroke pretty new toys is because we have this intrinsic belief that we want to see what's possible. Whenever you see the jacket hanging, I would argue you don't think about just wearing the jacket, walking out of the store and going to get a mocha latte frappuccino. You think about wearing the jacket, doing the sport that delivers on the passion that you believe in. It's that imagination and innovation that I argue is deeply connected to inspiration. So this guy, this cook, this part-time river guy, this guy that just had an arc welder and who had no business owning an arc welder in his garage, that put together stuff like this, finally got hired as an engineer for a company in Germany that is the leading manufacturer of e-bikes in Europe. He's a chief designer now. If you look at him, you're like, that is like one of the most straight-laced, looks like Mark, gray hair, handsome, a little bit older, in shape. You're like, well, he's a professional. Let me tell you something, folks, he should not be alive today. But now he builds stuff like this. This carbon fiber e-bike, full suspension e-bike, this is a $15,000 ride, y'all. And the guy that built it started with that. Never think that what you're doing is outlandish. Never think that what you're trying to deliver on doesn't have merit. Now, I'm all about RVs, but has anybody stayed in a teardrop trailer here? Anybody ever been in one of these things? They're really expensive. It's kind of like the Sprinter van, right? It's like the idea of van life. But who in a million years thought, I got a great idea. We're going to build this little metal coffin with a door and a window. We're going to put really cool graphics on the outside, maybe put in some hardwood, and they're going to sell really well. Never thought it was possible. Stand-up paddleboarding, e-bikes, all these things that we're talking about. Yet, here we are. So, if that's the economy, why is the conservation and stewardship so important? Now, some would argue that our industry rises and falls based on the utilization of these natural resources in an effective way. And I'm not going to stand up here and belabor the point because we're in trouble. We're in big trouble. And I like to think about this in not a doomsday way whenever I can, because when it really boils down to it, I share this all the time. I used to call this the blame game. It's somebody else's problem. It's somebody else's fault. Somebody else is going to take care of it. So I'm not going to worry about it. Anybody here ever built a trail? Done trail work like volunteerism? Easy? Tidy? Clean, soft, gentle work? Hard. Sweat equity. Incredibly difficult. Any of you ever gone back to a trail that you worked on, like you kicked the water bar or like stomped on it? Do you maybe run or ride on the trail that you worked on frequently? Revisit it? Sense of pride, sense of ownership? Does the pharmaceutical industry do that? Maybe the auto industry a little bit. Name another economy that has this much belief in the planet and our natural resources. Name another industry that has the opportunity to stand up and talk about it, not in the context of hugging trees and saving rivers, but in the context of if we don't take care of this, a multi-billion-dollar economy will fall apart. So that comes down to you. No pressure. When I worked for the governor, one of the first things I told him was that when it comes to the leadership of this multi-billion-dollar economy, you can't rely on jokers like me that somehow put it together and figured it out. There has to be a formal way to go about moving through the process and figuring it out. Now I'm putting this out. This is a little pat on the back for all of you. I know there's some MPAers in here too, so don't feel bad. You deserve to be here. Education and workforce development is the backbone of what we have to do next. Because if we don't, how are we going to figure out how to get the seat at the boardroom table to understand how to bring all the things we've been talking about tonight to the table? I tell Mark all the time, our job is to crack open the door and hold it open at all costs. And it's not easy, gang. It's hard. Your job will be to walk through it. So when you think about how can the old geezers help us figure out like what's the job, what's next, that is our job. Our job is to hold open the door. And for you to bring all that innovation, all that ideation, all that inspiration through to the other side. Which leads to this. Does anybody feel worse after going outside? That's true. That's very, very true. Sure, after a rainy run, like, oh my God, that sucked. But, oh, this cocoa is so warm. And it feels so good. They've actually discovered, has anybody heard about this? Right? It's sort of like a cool, trendy thing, like forest bathing. I actually saw a special where Oprah was talking about hugging trees with the person that created Afro Outdoors, the first all African-American organization to bring African Americans into the outdoors, and they were hugging sequoias. And I literally just turned on my TV. I'm like, why is Rue Mapp and Oprah in a redwood forest hugging trees? And then they talked about that, forest bathing. And the fact that 13 countries now can legally prescribe time outdoors instead of medication. And it's not just giving you a pedometer. It's like I have to track your GPS, and you need to spend 2 hours in these highly dense green spaces, and then you're gonna come back and we're gonna revisit the process. This is becoming a part of how we define public health. Green spaces within urban corridors. It's not just about carbon sinks, gang, and also trying to understand how to impact heat maps in urban communities. It's about how we feel. So, economic development, conservation and stewardship, education and workforce training, and public health. Tell me another economy that hits all those things. I'll wait. I'm going to wait for a second. Think hard. Most of you are students. Probably kind of bright. Anybody? Can we tell me? Think of economy that hits all four of those things. Food? It's good. That's a good one. Yep. Any other ones? Not many. Consider that your challenge, folks. Consider that the opportunity to connect all of those dots. Somewhere in there is what happens for you next. So instead of like, oh my God, is it a gear company? Do I go to an NGO and make no money and work for a nonprofit for the rest of my life? Maybe I can work for government. That sounds pretty good, but that's also really bad pay. But how do I do all these things? My argument to you tonight is pick something in one of those four lanes and don't be afraid to cross-pollinate. Because when you look at my screwed up career trajectory, none of it made sense until we started talking about this architecture. None of it was clear to me until literally, I don't know, 7 years ago, we started talking about these four pillars. So back to the big stuff. And I'm going to use Everest as a metaphor, so everybody hang on. It's going to be a metaphorical journey. Did anybody read what the base camp altitude is? I know it's kind of small. Just to get to the bottom of Everest takes about 2 weeks of walking, and it's at about 17,000 feet, which is kind of the journey the industry's been on up to this point. We're fun kids, it's really cool, and we're on this path, but oh, look, we're worth a lot of money. Maybe we should be part of a larger conversation. Yeah, we probably should. Let's get our act together. Maybe let's go to DC, start talking about some of these things. All right, that sounds like a good idea. Well, maybe, we're REI, let's hire a lobbyist. We're VF, let's hire somebody for government affairs. Yeah, good idea. All right, let's start to collect all those things. But bit by bit, no matter how small the effort, there's still this gigantic thing looming over our heads. And the gigantic thing is, what will our seat at the table look like politically? And I say that directly to all of you. Now, all of you probably aren't thinking, like, my job has nothing to do with politics. I just want to find a way to be in the industry and be happy. Bullshit. Think about another economy as big as we are that doesn't have an army of lobbyists fighting for what they want in Washington, D.C. An army of politicos influencing the elected officials. And by the way, blow your mind, getting people elected that believe what we believe. I got news for you, gang. That's the job. So from here on out, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO of the next REI or the next Patagonia. It doesn't matter if you just build a little widget that goes up onto another little widget, and that's your little place of peace in the world. Your responsibility, if you choose to be a part of this economy, is helping us discover how to put that voice together. And on Everest for me, it's about a 3-month trip door to door. And I don't know if most of you have done like an extended backpacking or mountaineering trip. It's just a lot of existential journey between your 2 years. You're just going around and around thinking about what's possible, especially when you're at an altitude where everything in your body screams at you to turn around and go down. The terrain is such that you have to find the magic no matter where you are, no matter what's going on. So if any of you are a student of Everest, there's a part of Everest at about 28,000 feet that's the yellow band, which is actually an old seabed floor. And I point this out for a really important reason, because as a mountaineer, as somebody who spent an entire career pointed towards getting to Everest, being on Everest, every time I approached the yellow band, while I was thinking about my clients and myself, terrain, the weather, how my oxygen flow was, the minute I hit the yellow band, I started looking for seashells. Because as an old seabed floor, every mountaineer that's on Everest knows this, that in the yellow band, you can find fossils if you look hard enough. And that is the best example I can give you about who we are and what we do. In the midst of something that should be really clear, really iconic, really amazing, you have to have your eyes open wide enough to spot those moments that make no sense and start to connect the dots. Sleeping at Camp 4, I like to share this one. It is the highest campsite on Earth. It's definitely a scary and an intimidating place. And the first time I rolled into Camp 4 with Eric Weinmeyer, the blind climber, we were under an immense amount of global scrutiny. A lot of folks in the media said that what we were doing was a stunt. And guide friends of mine said, well, you're going to get him killed. And as the mountain guide that intentionally took a blind person to Everest, you're also going to kill your career, because who's ever going to want to go climbing with the guide that intentionally killed the blind guy? So you're going to kill him and you're going to destroy your career. Why would you ever choose to do that? And this is from the industry that should be supporting each other. This is from the economy where we should be cheering each other on. Sir Edmund Hillary, oh, I'll never forget this. This even causes me pain today to even say this. Wrote an article in the New Zealand Herald saying that we were bastardizing the spirit of Mount Everest by taking Eric there. This is my childhood hero, y'all, telling us that what we were doing was wrong. Best example of us not being able to get out of our own way that I could give you. And you know, I think our industry, a lot up to this point, has been about the business of survival. You know, there's a reason why this looks like a junk show. When you're trying to set up camp at 26,000 feet, and you have oxygen bottles, a blind person, intense weather, setting up tents. When I got there the first time, the upper mountain was obscured by cloud. I really couldn't see what was going on. I was just super psyched to be there and handing out oxygen bottles and running around like an idiot without a mask on. And finally, the upper mountain cleared, and I got my first glimpse of what summit night was going to look like. Now, if you knew nothing about mountaineering, right, and I showed you this picture first, what would you say? Does it look like a camp at the bottom of a mountain? Does it look like, oh, it's nice. It looks like a good climb ahead of you. It looks like you're just getting started. I literally, the first time I was standing there and the first time I saw this, I was drooling, hypoxic, my oxygen mask was off. I looked up at this thing and I screamed to the universe, somebody just move the effing finish line. Screamed it out loud. Was so despondent, sat down in the snow, leaned back against the pile of old fabric. I was just looking up this thing. I'm like, I keep in mind, I've been a student of Everest my entire life. Finally got to this point. Nobody told me that when you got to Camp 4, it looked like you were just getting started. Good friend of mine, Ang Sadim, came over. This is a Sherpa friend who I've climbed with for 20 years and is now one of my very best friends. And he kneels down next to me. And this is a man who at that point had climbed Everest 4 times. And I looked at him like, Ang Sadim, did you know about this? Did you know? Like, what is this? And he literally looked at me and said, oh yeah, the Sherpas, we have a really funny joke. We say there's the mountain on top of mountain. Like, that's not funny, dude, at all. Give me a minute, I'm a little overwhelmed. And he was really insistent, like, get up, come on, crawl inside the tent. Like, you shouldn't be sitting out here. Let's come on, have some tea. Let's get ready to go for the top tonight. Like, we've got a lot of preparation to do. And I told him, I'm super overwhelmed. You just got to give me a hot minute, because this is, I'm a little, like, we're up here with the blind guy. Like, look at this thing. Like, this is insane. And he was being so insistent. I finally asked him, like, I'm saying, why the hell do you want me to get up and move so bad? Just give me a minute. He got really quiet and got down really, really close to me. He said, Luis, you really have to get up and move. You're lying on a dead body. What I thought was an old tent was actually another human being who had the same goals, same thoughts that I did, same aspirations in the exact same place on earth, laid down and never got back up. Now, I share this with you to bring home a really, really important point. The sports that we operate in and the magic that we try to bring to the world, you will fail. And if you do this work long enough in certain segments of the industry, people around you can and will die. Media thinks it's cool, it's dramatic, it's good copy for a catalog, it's dynamic, it's interesting. The reality is, somehow, some way, if this is your chosen industry, you have to find a way to push through that. And the only way that you're going to figure that out is the people that you surround yourself with. I immediately scrambled to my feet and I crawled in the tent. You can see by my buddy, another guide, another Eric, I managed to scare the hell out of everybody in my tent in about 20 seconds. My narrative was pretty simple. The clouds apart. Have you seen what it looks like outside? Eric really struggled getting up to camp 4. We're up here with a blind guy. There's a body 3 feet away from our tent. What are we doing here? And of course, you can see, like, I scared the hell out of everybody. He literally stuck his head out the tent door and he's like, oh my God, you're absolutely right. Now, as a mountaineer, you're around death a little bit, but it's really, really humbling to have death feet away from where you're sitting. Right at that moment, Eric called me from his tent. Now, this is important to point out because I think it sort of illustrates the lunacy and the magic of our industry. So Eric, throughout our entire expedition, being the first blind person on Everest, there was really this large conversation with all of us about making this impossible thing possible. And for most of the expedition, the other guides that were on the trip, I couldn't really find an answer. I didn't know because it was so big. It was so incredibly insane to think about how we were going to get this done. Yeah, people would say stupid shit like, oh, well, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, just step by step. But with this gigantic mountain looming miles above your head, I couldn't connect the dots in my own brain. And I never came up with an answer. But I don't know how you make the impossible thing possible. Because to me, it's just all impossible. And at that moment at Camp 4, I was scared out of my mind. And Eric, right at that minute, hey, Luis, could you come over here for a minute? Called me from his tent. Now, Eric was clearly the boss of our expedition. His sponsors paid for all of us to be there. So what happens when the boss wants to see you and you're not having such a hot day, you put your game face on, you go over and you fake it. And my journey was no different. I unzipped my tent door. I walked over to his tent door. I unzipped the tent. And this is what I saw. Here's how my mental process went. Guy on the left can see playing cards. Guy on the right can see playing cards. Blind guy in the middle playing cards. Blind guy playing cards. Blind guy, why is the blind guy? Why is the blind guy playing cards? And at 26,000 feet without oxygen, you start to go a little cuckoo. And Eric finally said, well, do you mind crawling in here and hanging out for a minute? I think these guys are cheating. What I found out later, months later actually, was that Eric heard my conversation with I'm sitting outside my tent over the body, asked this guy on the left to pull out his deck of cards and stage this whole thing for me. Because he knew that to get me out of my funk, it was going to have to be something so ridiculous, so like out of the ordinary, that there was, talking to me and trying to give me a pep talk with the body outside my tent was not going to do it. So this was his attempt as a leader to try to snap me out of it. Now, I don't know how any of you have dealt with crucial conversations at your current workplaces or past workplaces or even future workplaces. It's usually the conversation about effective communication, effective leadership. This innovative idea completely snapped me out of it. I'm like, whoa, hey, what's you guys doing poker, blackjack? What's going on? He said, I don't know, man, but just hang out. Like these guys aren't playing fair. I'm like, oh, all right, you got 2 aces and a jack and lay those down. Like, so I got engrossed in what was going on, kind of forgot about where we were for a hot minute, just because it was so surreal. And he asked me, how you doing? And I lied through my teeth. I said, I'm fine, it's good, we're good. I'm just gonna go have some tea, go to sleep, and get ready to go tonight. He said, I think I heard you talking to Hank sitting. Is there a body outside your tent? Yeah, there is. Did you make a crack about being up here with the blind guy? I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. Yes, I did. Sorry, I did. The clouds have parted and it looks really, really scary. I'm sorry. Like it's just, I'm a little freaked out right now. Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, tonight, would it be helpful to you, Luis, if I told you how I make this impossible thing possible with all you jokers every single day? I said, ooh, man, at this point, I'm all ears because the way I'm feeling right now, I think I might stay at Camp 4 in a support role, let you guys go for the top, and I'll be here if anything goes wrong. Because my head's not in it. I'm not there. And he said, tonight when we go for the top, believe in me as much as I believe in you. Tonight when we go for the summit, think that I am just as capable in getting this done as I think that you are. And if you can give me that, then I think we've got a shot. I crawled out of my tent and I went back to my tent, and I wish I would have had a map talking about all the landmarks, a strategy, tactics, a plan to figure out how we were going to eat the elephant for the final round. But all I had out of my tent that night was this big, gigantic, scary, awful, horrible looking thing with jet stream winds screaming from Nepal over into Tibet, not really knowing how we were going to eat the elephant, how we were going to get it done. Now on Everest, I'm sure most of you have read the magazines and read the books. You have to get up in the middle of the night, walk all the way through the night, try to summit before the afternoon storms. If you climb to Colorado 14er, it's the exact same thing. You want to get up and down before the afternoon buildup. And, I've been all over the world at this point in my career. I've been climbing in Antarctica. I've been climbing on all 7 continents now that we were on Everest. I have never experienced cold like my first summit on Everest. 80 to about 100 degrees below zero with wind chill, where every cell in your body is screaming at you to go down. So cold, in fact, that the fluid around your eyes would start to crystallize and freeze, shredding potentially your eyeball. Any exposed flesh was in danger of freezing. And we were having sort of this esoteric conversation through our oxygen masks as we were climbing, and Eric started laughing, and I heard it through his mask. And I pulled down my mask. I'm like, dude, why are you laughing? He's like, I ain't got no eyeballs. I don't have to worry about that. I don't know of any other industry on the planet where you could joke about that stuff, man. Our expedition total to get us to this moment in time, in the middle of the night, on the highest mountain in the world, with a documentary film crew, sponsors, trekkers, climbers, guides, Sherpas, the whole smash, was $3.7 million. For this moment in time, in the middle of the night, joking about frozen eyeballs. Eventually the sun comes up over Tibet, and it is the best sunrise you could possibly imagine. Because you know that a couple hours later, a little bit of warmth is going to come with it. This is actually a picture of the moon setting in front of Everest with the sun rising behind, and that shadow is actually Everest herself. This picture is taken from about 28,000 feet. Name another industry that provides moments like this, other than space travel. There isn't one. So far above any other mountain in the Himalayas, you kind of get this sense of burning the bridge behind you. And I want to be really clear about pecking order and hierarchy, because I think this illustrates how fluid our industry is and how you are only limited by what your imagination can provide. This expedition was watched around the world. We had people live streaming what we were doing. It was a really, really big deal in the media. The clock was ticking, but no one guide was angling to summit with Eric. The way we decided who moved in the front spot, who moved in the back spot, was how shot your voice was from pulling down your mask and talking. Everybody got hoarse because of the dry air and the oxygen really quickly. And at this point, another guy, Chris, said, Luis, you got to take over. My throat shot. It was business as usual. Left foot, right foot, breathe in, breathe out, keep moving up the hill. There was no hierarchy. Hey, Luis, you earned your right to step up front. Hey, Luis, you deserve this opportunity to be there. It was one guide supporting another. It was that simple. And about this time, his line of questioning was like taking a road trip with a 14-year-old. We were all thinking it. Where the hell is the summit? Are we there yet? We've been walking all night long. I had never been on Everest before. 90% of our team hadn't been on Everest before. We were all untested, and we saw people way up above stopping on this bump. And I told Eric, we've been going all night. If you want to know how high we are, see these dots up here? That's Camp 4. That's how high we were after climbing most of the night. And I said, people are changing out oxygen masks. They're stopping on top of this bump. Let's just get up there and take a look and see what's going on. Meanwhile, those oxygen bottles, the clock is ticking. You have one shot. When those things are empty, there's no 7-Eleven on the corner to refill them. At that point, everything sort of starts moving against you. Your pace, your physical health, how much oxygen you have, and just what you believe you're capable of. People turn around on Everest all the time because, simple fact, they're just freaked out. It's too much to mentally handle. We got to the top of what turned out to be the South Summit, and this is what I saw. I stopped so dead in my tracks looking at the final piece of real estate on the planet that Eric ran right to the back of me, just whoa, whoa. And he asked a question that he asked a million times before on the expedition. What does it look like? Now, I could have told him what I was thinking right in that moment. Scariest moment of my life. Have no idea how we're gonna get this done. Probably gonna die. Really, really scary. Lots of technical climbing in front of us. Big wind. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared. Instead, I turned around, I pulled down my mask, I looked him straight in the face, and I said, man, we've got it. This is no more technical than anything we've already done on this trip. Just stay on my heels, and we'll be there in a couple of hours. Believe in me as much as I believe in you. You know, when we left the South Summit and we started moving towards the summit, time really does start to slow down at that altitude. Everything starts to move in slow motion. You're wearing huge down suit, goggles, mask. You can't really turn around and look down the ridge very well. Eric was asking, you know, is the rest of the team close? Where are they? Are they up in front? Are they behind? You would think we would know where each other was, right? But you get so spread out. There's so much going on in the middle of the night. Everybody's connected by radios, and you really rely on that connectivity to make it happen. Then you had to deal with 40 feet of rock climbing, a la the Hillary Step, right below the summit. You know, imagine going to your local rock climbing gym with big mitts, big boots, down suit, mask, goggles, trying to get up and down a wall. That's kind of what it's like. Right in the middle of the Hillary Step, Eric was really at Luis, could you please get on the radio? I'm just wondering where people are. Can you take a look? Like, Eric, literally, I can't turn around, man. There's nothing I can do. But let me get on the radio when I get safe, and I'll ask. The minute I reach for the radio, you're so high at that point, you're getting interference from radio stations in Nepal and Tibet. And right at that moment, Britney Spears' Oops, I Did It Again came on the radio. And I remember having this moment on top of the Hillary Step where we just sort of stood there and listened and sort of bounced up and down. And soundtrack of my life, gang. It's the way it'll always be. Whenever anybody asks me what codifies our industry, and what we mean to each other, and what we could mean collectively to this global conversation about what we represent, I try to show them this picture. This hangs in my office, it hangs in my home, it's hung in every home from this expedition all the way to present day. This is every single Sherpa and every single guide with their oxygen turned down at 28,000 feet, waiting for Eric to summit. Because the promise that we made to each other that we were there to help the first blind person challenge what the world thought was possible. It had nothing to do with us being there and everything to do with him. This is what we're capable of, gang, when we really get it together. This is what we're capable of when we get out of each other's way. This is what we're capable of when we lift each other up. And eventually you come around the corner and there's just no place else to go. 29,038 feet. People ask me all the time, Luis, you got up and down with Eric. Why would you ever choose to go back again? Well, I'll tell you. Anybody from Texas in here? I'm going to apologize to you directly if you're having anything. Every rich oil baron from Texas after this expedition started calling me saying, if you get the blind guy out there, you can sure as hell get me to the top. Here's a bunch of money. Come on. That's the way they talk too. Now, I could lie to you and say I didn't take the money, wasn't driven by ego, didn't choose to go back year after year, didn't love the fame, didn't love the notoriety. I dug every single part of it. Here was this mountain guide with a limited education hanging out with champions of industry that were throwing money at the process because they wanted to stand on top of Everest. I was my grandfather's grandson. 8th grade education, fly fishing guide, started an outdoor shop. I thought I was taking my place at the table. This is what I was supposed to do. But eventually it got to this point for me where I understood that I was limiting my own capacity for what was possible. Now, you could argue that staying a professional athlete only has so much longevity. You can't do it forever. You start to fall apart, start to fall apart. Yes, all that's true. But what got me to Vail Resorts, Mark, this is where you get embarrassed, in my long hair and bead days, I was on my way to work for Outward Bound in Australia. I'd gotten an offer to be the chief operating officer in Australia. Like, this is it. That's how I get out of the mountains. It's how I stay true to Outward Bound. It's an executive level role. It all makes sense. This is what I know. It fits in a safe box. This is what I'm going to do. And this dude calls. Like, well, let's go have lunch for a second. Hang out, talk. And his question was really simple. Luis, you've kind of done that. You've done Outward Bound for a really long time. But what you haven't done is what I'm proposing. And my response to him was pretty straightforward. I know a little bit about that, but I don't think I know enough. His belief in me to even let me try changed everything. And that responsibility that you have for what comes next, the people that open that door for you, this is how we move it forward. This is how we change the belief in what's possible. And then I thought, okay, I'm happy, I'm good, I'm working for Vail Resorts, I get to take meetings on the ski hill. This is kind of cool. I believe in this. I believe in trying to figure out how to make this better. I ran for town council in Eagle because I believed in local government. I was living in a 7,500 person community. I was getting ready to make a run for mayor. I'm like, this is my own little world, safe. This is great. This is all I need to do. And then Hickenlooper called, our former governor, now senator. Luis, I've heard about all these things that you're doing from friends. I know that you're getting ready to make a run for mayor, but the short of it is he basically said, I was wondering if you'd like to be the first director for the outdoor industry office for the state. Huh? What's that? I don't know. I just think we should do it. It represents 10% of Colorado's economy. There should be Overwatch, the same way every other industry has Overwatch. Come help me figure it out. No roadmap, no job description, no like, okay, well, I fit all these boxes. This looks really, really good. So I feel safe applying for this. His only guidance to me was have fun, don't break anything, don't make it worse. From our governor, literally. And so I thought, all right, let's figure out what's going on in the industry and economy in Colorado. Okay, I'm happy. This is enough. This is good. I think I'm set, right? This is fine. But then we started asking the question, what if we talk to other governors about figuring out how to create this office in their state? Think bigger, think more broadly. It ballooned to 8 states, and now 18 states have the office, starting from 2. Their job is to report directly to their governors on the Overwatch for our industry and for our economy. And now I'm here. And people are like, well, why did you go to work for a widget company? Is that just a bigger job, more money? Just you got tired, you got old, what happened? These guys and these guys, I was a broke 20-year-old mountain guide, gave me boxes of free stuff and believed in me when no one else would. So when people ask me, oh, it's a great job, it seems like logically, yes, you should be in government affairs and global impact, you work for a governor, that makes sense. That has nothing to do with my story. What has to do with my story is now I get to defend the brand that believed in me when no one else did. So what your path is connected to your origin story, don't worry so much about how dot A connects to dot B. Take pleasure in how squiggly that line can be. Have you seen this thing on TikTok lately where it's like somebody's like doing a humble brag about, oh my God, we get to do all this amazing stuff. And then they post a picture of themselves as a kid that says, we actually get to do this stuff. That's me, gang. If you would have told this little duck hunting, fly fishing nerd that I'd be standing on a stage in front of all of you in Boulder, Colorado, getting to talk about the magic of what we're capable of, I And I thought I was just gonna own my grandfather's store when he passed away. That was gonna be the extent of it. And I loved every part of that possibility. Last thing I want to leave you with is to understand what I think our call to action is. So this is Angsadane. This is the guy that pulled me off the body on the summit of Everest. And he's been on every Himalayan trip that I've been on. So 22 expeditions total. And after every single expedition, I'm always psyched to go down to his village and hang out with this guy. This is his father. I know he looks to be about 150 years old, but he's an incredibly shrewd businessman. But I'm always so excited when I'm sitting translating to tell him just how proud I am of working with his son and how the success, failure, laugh, cry, like all the things we've been a part of, just how much I value his partnership and friendship in the work that we do. And he says to me the same thing with I'm sitting translating that I'm going to tell you tonight in closing. He says, Lulu, that's my nickname in Nepal. Lulu, it sounds like you brought a bunch of white people and money to my country again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. He's a capitalist at heart. He owns 3 tea houses, so he's all about the rupees. He loves seeing traffic come through. But beyond being a small business owner, he says, Luis, tell me what it is that you do that's going to make my grandchildren's world better. Tell me what it is that you and my son do that is going to make their world more extraordinary. So how or if you choose to walk through the door in this economy, you have to think about what comes next. You have to start your journey with that question. Because my opinion is if you do, no limits, anything is possible. Thanks, gang. That's it. You got my phone?
I'm gonna get a microphone back here.
If anybody has to leave, go eat, go to the bathroom, enjoy the rest of your evening, please feel free. Don't feel like you have to hang out. We won't heckle you going out. Whoa, is it on? I won't. Pardon me.
What questions we have?
Anybody? That's okay. Don't feel like you have to ask a question, but go ahead.
How often do you go to Ecuador and help down there? Because I'm from Chile.
Oh, there it is. Okay, perfecto.
Soy de Chile.
¿De qué parte de Chile?
Santiago.
Fiebre.
So what's going on with Ecuador? I know
One time per year, usually. I try to get COVID kind of messed that up, but I try to go once a year, and a lot of friends that I grew up with down there own guiding companies, and they'll let me roll down and do a quick trip here and there.
you climb
Oh yeah.
mountains down there.
Once a climber, always a climber. You never kind of outgrow it. Great question. Got to stay in the game, Jane. Anybody else?
So I'm curious about times when the priorities of, I guess this goes back to the outdoor recreation industry office, but just your general viewpoint. When the priorities of the outdoor recreation industry do not align with conservation, and how do you manage those tensions?
That's such a great question. And I think you're seeing a similar conversation with the transition to renewable energy right now with oil and gas, where it's not a light switch, it's a gradual transition from one thing to another, and the sense of urgency and intensity. And the story I'll tell is kind of quick, but pretty simple. So, in our industry, I think there is this perception of this is a consumptive lane and we are a regenerative lane. And the example I'll use is mountain biking, human powered, dirt biking, fossil fuel powered, right? Dirty, nasty dirt bikers, fun, exercise, healthy. So we set up these juxtapositions within our own economy. And the way we started to think about it was called the garage principle. And my argument was people tend to defend their gateway drug into the industry. So if you came to the industry as a climber first, a biker first, a boater first, a birder first, a dirt biker, hunting, fishing, whatever it is, that's your jam. And that's usually what you defend. All the other stuff, it's like, well, I do that, but I'm not going to get that fight. That's exhausting. Yet you open up a garage for a true recreational, it's like, oh my God, kayak, dirt bike, mountain bike, climbing pack, kayak, all the stand-up paddleboard, all these different things. but yet we don't feel compelled to hop into the conversation. Yet the thing that's changing that is how the generational conversation shows up. So here's the example. One of my biggest fights in serving on town council in Eagle was to try to get us to become a mountain biking destination. Now, say what you will about the development of trails within open spaces and what that looks like. We were looking at it as an economic development opportunity for town, and the fact that our high school had tons of kids that rode. And at the time, a lot of high schools were starting high school mountain biking teams, like football teams, soccer teams, swim team, all those different things. And so we invested town money into the expansion of our trail system at a time when we needed a second wastewater treatment facility. Can I tell you the conversations that I had in the milk aisle, city market, of people stopping me like, why you are foolish, stupid, incorrect, that is a bad idea, and my toilet's gonna back up because of you. And the hope that we had was, well, it's not just about building the trail. Now we got to go out and pitch it. And we want to get the high school mountain biking championships to town. So it was a collective effort to figure out how to get all those high school kids there to town. We succeeded. Town was brimming the first year. We put out a call to everybody on town's email list. If you have space in your front yard or backyard and you'll allow somebody to camp and use your bathroom, town park was full. The hotels were full. Everything was full. Raking in tax revenue, hand over fist. And the night before the finals, it started to rain hard. Then the back fence to a local rancher broke, and about 60 head of cattle trampled the back curves of the finals loop. To the point where town council and the mayor got a call in the middle of the night, like, come down to City Hall, we got in trouble. The ranchers were out overnight on their ATVs making stuff worse, trying to get the cattle back past the fence line, put the fence back up. They finally got that done about 4 o'clock in the morning. They showed up at town hall and they're like, I'm sorry, but it is completely chewed up. Nobody can ride. This is a true story. You can look it up in the Mail Daily. And we were sitting there staring at each other like, okay, town's full, finals are tomorrow, everybody's in town, kids are ready to ride, we have no course. Can we reroute the course? Is it going to be dry enough? We're going to have to wait a little bit in the morning to have stuff dry off. Let's see. Right at that moment, these 3 old crusty dudes and these 2 crusty women walk in that lead the dirt biking coalition in the Eagle Valley. And they all said, I've got grandkids that are riding tomorrow. If you give me permission to ride the trails, we'll go out from now to sunrise and we'll pack it all down and we'll get it back into rideable condition. But it's illegal to ride a dirt bike on a mountain biking trail. You all have the authority to give us the authority to go on a trail that ordinarily we will never touch, see, or use. But I'm going to do it because this is for my grandkid. This is for who comes next. And they did it. We had finals. Very few people knew about the story until a little article in the Mail Daily came out. And the reason why I share that story is that getting out of our own way requires that tipping point conversation. None of us were geniuses about, let's call the dirt bikers and give them access and ask them to ride the trail. We show up with our own baggage to those tables. And what that lesson taught me was you have to challenge every perception you have about the segments of the industry that you're surrounded by. And you have to really force yourself to think outside the box about what's possible. The other story I tell really quickly is being the grandson of a specialty retailer that sold guns. As a kid, I was a card-carrying member of the NRA. Why? Because back then, the NRA was about hunter safety and education. They weren't the lobbying behemoth that they are right now. So the damning of the NRA and what they've morphed into was not what I knew back in my youth. If we don't challenge these perceptions and force the conversation about the intersectionality, this is what is in front of us. That's the challenge. And that's the part of getting out of our own way that we're going to have to work really hard on. Awesome question. Really good question. Maybe not a good answer, but really good question. One more?
Yeah, one more.
Sure. Food. I'm hungry.
Hi, this is Rachel.
I was curious, you were talking about getting out of your own way and the things that you do to like mentally prepare for those conversations, but I'm curious, I assume that you have conversations with people that don't have that same mindset as you sometimes. And what are your strategies to have those conversations and make them as successful and effective as possible?
Why were you nervous about asking that question? That's wonderful. That's great. Thank you. So did anybody ever hear the race in Colorado, Pedal the Plains? The bike race, the road race? So it was Governor Hickenlooper's pet project, and his idea was having a road race in the Eastern Plains, because the Eastern Plains get no love, right? Life starts at Denver and goes west, but the Eastern Plains, that's Kansas, like who the hell goes out there? So his idea was to host a bike race where we do a bunch of farm to table. You would cycle through towns, you camp in fields. It would just be this awesome, cool thing. And he's like, go talk to some ranchers, figure it out. I told him, like, I'm going to get shot. Like, this is not a good idea. And I'm from a rural community in the Midwest, and I know what I'm facing. And Luis Benitez is going to show up to talk to a rancher on the Eastern Plains. Okay, that's a good idea. Thanks, boss. So baggage, right? And so I show up, and sure enough, that there was a town meeting, and the town will remain nameless, and on a stage like this with an audience like this, and man, I got an earful. You're gonna bring drugs, sex, crime, and drugs to my town, and drugs. I couldn't, but it was kind of surreal. And so I just kind of let the vent go for a little bit. And to your point, I didn't think there was a path or a bridge, but part of my job was to find that bridge. And, I thought back to my grandfather actually, and all the people that used to hang out in his shop, which were staunch Republicans. I mean, if you look up stories about Senator Ashcroft and Senator Danforth, like evil shit. But I knew that Senator Danforth liked the highball, and I knew that Senator Ashcroft liked a gin and tonic. And they cared about wildfowl conservation, were members of Trout Unlimited, and wanted to protect and preserve these places for their kids and grandkids. And so it was literally like a light bulb moment. And I just asked this one gentleman, what do you love to do around town? Well, what the hell do you think I love? I love to hunt and fish, and you guys are, drugs and crime and drugs and people and drugs. And I asked him, just why do you love it? I'm like, well, my dad took me, and my dad's dad took him, and I've lived here for, on and on and on. Usual story. I said, do you take your kids? Hell yes, I take my kids there, and my kids take their kids there, my grandkids, and you're just gonna mess it all up. Well, okay, well, do you want to protect and preserve that thing? Like, yeah, that's why I'm talking to you right now. I'm like, okay, well, that's great. So we actually have a lot in common. And that's where I started the conversation, because my argument is that the outdoor industry is one of, if not the only, bipartisan economy left on the planet. I would argue, because of the meatless meats movement, that food has even gotten political. But if you start from this place of asking, what do you love and why? And how, through the journey of protecting, promoting, and preserving it, can we find common ground, actually works. And it wasn't just in that spot. And I'll never forget, we set the route for Pedal the Plains, and man, this guy was just grumpy all day long. And I remember he said, nobody's camping in my field, nobody's coming near my, if anybody comes near my fence, guns coming out. I mean, literally, like, this is the way it's going to happen. I said, all right, well, we're not going to root anywhere near you, but I'd like to come camping in your field. Would you mind if I come hang out with you? So literally took like a 4-mile detour, went down to his farm, and I just set up my tent outside of his fence. And it's like, if you come say hi, great. If you don't, no big deal. It's fine. And sure enough, his wife came out and brought me some iced tea, and we started chatting over the fence. And then he came out grumpy, like, oh, I saw it blocked up the damn road through town, and it's just terrible. You can't sleep out here. Just come on inside the fence, come close to the house, because you can use the hose to wash off. Come on, I can't let you sleep outside my fence. That's not neighborly. It was the last thing he said to me. And right there and then I knew that if you start from that place of what do you love and why, And how can we find that common ground? That's it. The next year, it's like, I was thinking, we slaughtered a couple, we slaughtered a little beef last year, and I've got some neighbors up this way, and I know it's kind of a dead end, but if you come up here, we could maybe, I don't know, just something simple. And now it's called Herb's Detour. So in the title of the plains, like if you want really good cow, you go down a dirt road for 3.5 miles, and it's got nothing to do with the route and everything to do with visiting Herb's farm. So don't tell me it can't be done. It can. Great question to end on. That was good.
Great question to end on. Let's give him one more. I can see the light now. Oh, no, I don't need the glass. I see the light. Well, always inspiring. Thank you so much, for your Luis, for your time and your inspiration. Couple thank yous really quick. Thank you to E-Town for this beautiful venue and great support. To all of you for joining us and your commitment to making a lasting and positive difference as well. As we said, we can't do it unless it's all of us together. We are a force. And also special thanks to MENV alumni Donna Merton, founder, owner of Fed Boulder, whose mission is honest food with purpose. We've got some great food awaiting us and some drinks downstairs. So the fun's not over yet. Please join us in the cafe room, otherwise known as the basement, all the way down. For appetizers provided by Fed Boulder, networking and community building. So thank you all for coming.